you see a little progress bar. There's none of that in Revival. Everything has a mini game attached to it. So like if you were to like mine ore from like a mountain or whatever, some ore vein, you'll actually be prompted with a mini game you can use. And if you're successful at it, you get the ore. If you're not, you lose your chance to, and it gets depleted. And the higher your skill level is, the easier the game is. So it's like it's even though your skill is going up, again, it goes back to the system of 50% skill and 50% roll the dice. Like, we don't want players that are just going to town all day long and all they're doing is, slouching back in their chair and just like clicking a button over and over, and that's their gameplay experience. We want you at all times kind of not on the edge of your seat, because I think that can be a little too much anxiety, but still feeling like you're actually doing something and engaging the game. So that's something to always remember, is like for everything you do, there's no hot bars like press a button and that's going to magically take over the skill that should be associated with what you're doing. But the good thing also is with the crafting, every single crafting minigame that there is, we also will have a mobile counterpart where you can take your account on the go. All those minigames are there on your phone. And even, although you won't be able to actually pull resources through playing those minigames, you'll actually be able to raise your skill point in that tree. If you keep playing the minigame over and over and over, you can actually raise it on the go. So that helps out with players who feel like, they're being punished for grinding, and sometimes minigames can feel, like if you're playing it too much, like the grind might get to you or whatever. So we're trying our hardest to figure out a system that alleviates that and helps players get better at the game easier. So.
Okay, so let's digest some of that, what you just said. You kind of said this is going to be a cross-platform game. It's going to allow people to play on mobile devices, do crafting and gathering, working on their skills, but not actually gathering the resources.
Yeah, so you're not actually playing in the game. You're not logged in, running around with your character. Imagine it, you have the game, you open it up, and here's just a list of, you log into your account, here's a list of all the mini games you've actually done. Mm-hmm. So like you can't just be like, I've never done, weaving or whatever for tailoring. So that's, inaccessible to you until you actually do it in the real game. But the skills you've actually done are now accessible to you. You could just click it on a list and it'll bring up the mini game. And if you successfully do it, it'll like, of course in the beginning you'll get a lot of skill gain. And then towards the end it'll get slower and slower. But so on the go, you can be playing the exact same mini game you'd be playing in the game on the go and raising your skill.
How important is crafting going to be to the game?
It's pretty important because, for one, it's I think crafting is really fun. It's a good break from all the action, but it's also like it drives the player economy. So our economy is like extremely critical in the game because it affects the actual karma of cities and the world itself as a whole. So if like players aren't trading with each other and they're not trading with local vendors, more importantly local vendors other than each other, the actual economy will start dropping. So crafters and merchants are like extremely valuable, because what happens is the merchants will like start actually fighting each other, and not in the sense of like actual PvP, but they'll actually be putting out like bounties against competitor merchants, and that's how them as a merchant, like even though you're not killing somebody, you will actually lower your karma because you're putting out bounties for these other merchant players and stuff. So there's ways to sabotage business, and as a merchant, you're really thriving off crafting. For example, let's say I always say mining because I think mining is like a really common thing people can really understand. But let's say here's a mining like city, and this city has like a lot of ore. A lot of players are coming here now, and they're starting to mine, starting to tear away the ore, bring it to the city, smelt it, and sell it to the local vendors. But now let's say there's not enough blacksmiths in this city now coming in trying to buy that ore that the merchants are getting. So what happens is the supply and demand will stop. Basically, they'll be like, well, we have too much, like, we're not going to buy anymore. So what can happen is there'll be another part of the world where, there's like, hey, we actually do need that because all the merchants, all the blacksmiths for some reason are down here on this other side of the planet. And so they'll send out a request, and these merchants will actually send out caravans to go to the city and actually transport all that extra ore and ingots or whatever from the smelting and bring it down to the merchant. bring it down to the merchants so they can sell to the blacksmiths, or the blacksmiths can go up to that city and actually start working there. So, and there was, again, that's all going to affect the city. So if the city's like economy comes to a standstill because no one's buying anything, the quality of the city will actually start to deteriorate, and then like guards will stop patrolling as much. It'll be easier for murderers to run around and kill each other, and thieves at night to come in and steal stuff. So like players like crafting and building and actually working in the economy is like extremely drilled into the game, and it has like a very noticeable effect rather than something that's just tacked on. Like you'll actually see like the city decay, like the buildings will start crumbling and stuff like that. So, and eventually like NPCs will start leaving the city, and to the point where the city will become a ghost town if it economically shuts down. So that's like one of the systems we're going to incorporate. And then, again, that's all dynamic. So that'll just happen if players aren't feeding into the economy just like how we would in the real world.
I noticed one of the things you talked about in the previous interview with MMORPG.com that came out on July 31st was you talked about the karma system. Now, does that extend to individual players as well? Like, which kind of adds to the next question as far as player versus player combat in the game. I mean, can I just totally be a dick and run around and troll other people and kill them and get a negative karma score, or how's that work out?
So yeah, players do have individual karma, and your karma is like, it's not just like this one global stamp. Although we do have an averaged karma for you to actually gauge like, this is who I am overall. Every single thing you do and every single thing you interact with has its own karma system, like karma gauge, and that is like in the red to blue to gray scale range, right? With plenty of shades between. What happens is, you'll start seeing the world react to you differently. And, we have this, the GMs are gods, and the gods in the game are like very, attached to the game. And so we have these things planned to hopefully lower trolling as much as possible, because it's an issue in a lot of these games where players can just run around and gank each other, and then you're just having a bad time because of this. Well, we have karma systems that kind of help with that, because there's, to a degree, like we can tell if players are seriously trolling other players and annoying and harassing players and stuff like that. We tie it into the actual fiction of things like no NPC will talk to you for some reason, and that's like an act of the gods for some reason. That's not happening to you because you're trolling players. So our GMs will be monitoring that type of stuff. If there's like a serious troll, and and I told people this before, like I used to be one of those trolls. I used to run around and just I loved annoying people, and I loved making people have a bad time. I hate to say
some people.
Well, it's terribly fun, and so I mean, and I always say, good way that I'm looking at this because I know how people can abuse each other, and it's a system that we're trying to nail down right now, and I feel confident that we're going to have a really good solution to it that ties in the game's fiction. I feel like we've found a lot of ways using the game's gods as being ways to police the players without it feeling intrusive or something that is like punishing players for just playing the game. Where it's from the get-go, players know that this is how the world is instead. So, there's plenty of ways. There's little, like I've mentioned before, like if you don't want to do PvP, there's like blessings you can get from a church that will protect you. No player can attack you. You can't attack other players, and those last for like a day. And then there's other things too. Like if a guild owns a city, the guild can also buy a blessing for the city that will actually put a protection around the entire city. So that'll actually protect the city. So if you're a player that just absolutely cannot stand PvP or the concept of getting attacked, stay within the game's fiction, the world. We have all these systems built up to help embrace you, like so you can have this good gameplay experience. And we're not. And every time I say free to play, people kind of get weirded out by that, because I think. When I see games like Candy Crush where they're like pay $15 and I think that's terrible, and those people should be jailed for doing stuff like that to
buy
players.
these keys to unlock these boxes that drop everywhere.
Yeah, I believe in that. So I'm sure you've heard it before, like the whole 70% sheep, 20% wolves, 10% whales system and that's how a lot of game designers build free-to-play games. Is they're trying to get that 30% of the wolves and the whales, and they're trying to get them to spend money, and they don't care about the 70% sheep. Those are just players for the wolves to eat. Like that's essentially their concept, and I think that's pretty evil. What my whole theory is I prefer pennies over dollars. If that makes sense. So I don't. If you have 70% of those players, and they're every now and then, they really like something, and they want to pay, 25 cents to have like this cool looking armor that really doesn't affect the game. Like that's great. Or like a few pennies to have a dime to have a blessing that does something, like something in your inventory can't get ganked at all, or an entire bag can't get ganked if you die. Like those are things that are like really cheap, but I also allow players to gain those, like the points necessary to buy those just by playing the game. So you don't have to ever, like if you're a player that's playing nonstop all the time, you probably really don't ever have to buy anything. I mean, we do have like big things like for like custom content, like we're planning the ability to have like players make their own models for like a table, like you can make their own model, but that gets really complex and we have to go through an actual QA process with it. So those are going to actually cost money for players if they want to do that, just so we can actually process it. Those things cost money, but if you are just like playing the game, you're running around and you're constantly doing it, you as a player playing the game nonstop, you're doing us a favor because you're making the game world keep on ticking, keep on move forward. So we want to make sure that you're playing comfortably and you're getting what you want. But this is more so, the pennies focus is more so for players that they only can play like 30 minutes, an hour a day maybe, or every other day they can only put in a few, like an hour or two or whatever. Just things that give them like little boosts and stuff, but nothing that's just like you see the guy rolling in on the Ferrari in this, the town hall, and then everyone looks at him and knows he just bought his way in, and we don't believe in allowing that kind of douchebaggery in the game. So that's something we're trying to avoid at all costs. So again, yeah, what were we talking about? Sorry,
I think we were talking about actually that one of the things you mentioned in that rant was player looting.
Mm-hmm.
Did I hear you correct? Is this so? Are you going to have? We are going to have PvP, and
yes,
we're going to have player looting.
Absolutely, I believe player looting is something that was abandoned before it was properly looked at in a way that it can be fun. I think player looting can absolutely be fun, but I think it has to be limited. Like if you have some ridiculously expensive item on you that took you forever to play to get those items, I think it should be, easy for you to protect yourself from losing that forever. Because we want to make a hardcore, in the sense of a world where you're stressed out for going out and adventuring in this dangerous world. Like if you just go out there and you know that you're going to be fine forever, you're not going to have that feeling of I can lose some stuff, So it's mostly things like small items and stuff or gold that you might have on you, but even to a degree, you can get insurance on your stuff, you can get blessings on your stuff, like all these things that are around to protect you, that are available all within the game's fiction to help you survive the world in whatever way you want.
All right, so real quick, because I know I've had you for about a half an hour now, is there anything, if you were remiss in not asking about, we've kind of talked about the fact that it is free to play, and you've mentioned things that you don't want to monetize. Do you guys kind of have a idea on how you are going to monetize it, or is that not something you're ready to fully talk about yet?
I mean, the biggest thing I can say about it right now is like, yeah, there's a whole plan that I don't really want to talk about too much right now.
Okay.
But the biggest thing to say about it is, I said before, every single thing we have that is monetized is within the game's fiction. That means, and it's really important because there's no like, oh, I'm just opening up this game window and pressing the make me better button. Like if you want to gain your skills faster, for example, you go to like a god of luck in his temple, and you have to travel through the world to get there, and you have to donate to that temple to get the blessing. And again, so that's tied into the fiction and a way of doing it, I guess. But it's like that kind of stuff makes it more, in my opinion, more easy to stomach, as you're not paying to win like